Three idiots that prefer the term heroes arrive after several weeks of sailing aboard a small dinghy to the remote island of Wollen, where they intend to become adventurers and live lives of daring and dangerous pursuits, felling monsters, delving dungeons, and slaying dragons. All that. And they didn't bring a healer. First, there was Dane, the dwarven barbarian who fights with a furious rage, fueled by his deeply unresolved daddy issues. Next, there was Nadar, a bronze dragonborn fighter, who was basically just there because his full-blooded dragon mother wanted him to get out of the house for a bit. And finally, there was Zook, a gnome wizard with a heart of gold, and who had never, ever done anything wrong in his entire life. They decided to begin their adventures in Briston, a small city harbour with a central underground mine, the locals of which were filled mostly with dwarves, half-orcs, the occasional Goliath or two, and a few humans who were allowed in out of pity, following the messy accidents from trying to eat nails for breakfast. Amongst the people here, magic is regarded about as well as Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. So imagine the shock of the party as they make their way inside the local tavern, amply named the First Spill, where every rough and tough patron, who was moments ago arguing over who has the more chiseled abs, is suddenly dead quiet and keeping their eyes practically inside their flask as a love child of a metagamer and a min-maxer walks through the door and starts acting about twice as obnoxious. With no one else even daring to look in this twerp's general direction, the barbarian decides it's time to use the same solution that has helped him solve most of his problems in life, and promptly clocks a little snot right out cold there and then. No one seems to appreciate Dane's good deed for the day. Then, as the limp body begins to scratch its growing claws across the floorboards, and someone cries out, "Werewolf!" from the back, the party quickly begin to consider getting their affairs in order, as they suddenly find themselves face to face with a feral, unkempt beast, a fearsome creature of the night, half man, half rat. A wererat. As the entire tavern takes one collectively disappointed sigh, and the rat attempts to bite the dwarf, the party promptly proceeds to provide a physical example of the abstract concept known as karma. With that out of the way, the Dragonborn produces the perfect amount of rope from his backpack that would be needed to tie up exactly one fully grown person, which he swears he was only carrying for adventuring-related reasons. Unfortunately, in the middle of the chaos, the wererat we learn to be named Patrick Wass up and flees by turning himself into a rat and escaping his bindings, running right out the door. Even as the party gives up on the brat, one particular half-orc in the tavern is promptly eager to give chase for what could be one of any number of grudges. With that behind them, the party enjoy the drinks offered to them for the very affordable price of free. Then consult the job board for tasks worth the risk of dying horribly in exchange for a week's wages. While the offer of 30 gold for an escort of the caravan to the northwestern city of Dale does sound reasonable, the curiosity of an entire 50 gold offered to any group that can help with a bit of afternoon gardening seems too good and, more importantly, far too interesting to pass up. So, the party finds themselves making their way outside the city walls to a smaller farming outskirts made up of a mostly halfling population, with an occasional gnome scattered in between, with one of such gnomes being the sweet elderly lady named Wendy Tuttle that posted the job in the first place. As she welcomes them in for tea, with the exception of the regular-sized dragonborn that the house was not built in accommodation to. She explains that some of her weeds are of a magical nature, and prove to be a bit of a hassle for her to always be dealing with at her age. So she thought it might be a good idea to hire some strapping young men, who might be more able-bodied to deal with these pesky things. Curious to see what all the fuss is about, the three of them reconvene around the back of the house, and are promptly underwhelmed by their adversities. So, with the help of Zook's practical proficiency in pyromancy, they manage to make relatively quick work of the awakened shrubs. Unfortunately, it seems there was also a fully grown awakened tree in the backyard as well, and it was then that the party quickly learned that vegetation is in fact capable of maternal instincts, and the party had practically just made Mama Tree watch as they burned her children alive. In the pursuing struggle, as the party promptly learned they aren't yet ready to earn a 50 gold salary just for gardening, they saw their heroic saviour calmly approaching them in their hour of need. An old lady and her trusty walking stick. Or at least, what the party had mistaken for a walking stick, as the old gnome lady lifted a staff of fire towards the tree, and unleashed a fireball to engulf the tree in a blaze of glory. Thankfully, just narrowly avoiding the fireball above their heads, the party were able to stand unharmed in the fight, save for their singed eyebrows. Yet the party quickly saw why Wendy hadn't rushed out, staff blazing from the start, and had instead tried to rely on the others to spare her the strain. The full power of the spell, even channeling most of the power from the staff itself, was still enough to drop the poor woman, much like a drunken dwarf after being questioned whether or not he could really chug 2 mugs of Underdark ale at the same time. Thus, the party needed to carry the frail old lady to her bedroom, where with the faint bit of consciousness that she still had left, she let them know they could take their 50 gold payment from her bedroom wardrobe. With the poor elderly out cold for at least a day, Zook goes to retrieve his payment, and finds himself face to face with what surely had to be the old lady's entire savings. But Zook, being the angel that he so clearly was, resisted the urge to take advantage of the situation, and was careful to not take a single copper piece more than what was promised. As the old lady wasn't much for conversation after blacking out, the party decided to head back and look for another job opportunity before the day was over. Unfortunately, as the party were walking back to the walls of Bristol, Dane began to notice the bite he suffered from the were-rat earlier was now proving to become noticeably itchy. And with the horrifying concept of wasting a perfectly good dose of lycanthropy on a rat of all things, Dane decided to start looking for a cure ASAP. Unfortunately, the townsfolk weren't much help in giving directions. They were far too busy competing for potential mates by smashing their skulls together. With an eventual bit of luck, however, they were pointed in the direction of the most upstanding and prestigious magic store one could find in Bristol. A rundown shack in a back alley. Taking this welcoming enterprise in stride, the party merrily creeps right inside on full alert, with one hand on their weapons at all times. To their surprise, however, the owner of what could only be considered a store, in the same way that rule lawyers could be considered fun at parties, was a surprisingly pleasant and extremely flamboyant goblin by the name of Eckle. His underwhelming business was simply caused by a rather foreseeable fallacy of selling magical scrolls to a literal city of barbarians that practiced neither magic nor reading. Sparing enough time to stop flirting shamelessly with the goblin, Dane requests the service of removing a curse. However, even with the paycheck from the old lady, the party couldn't quite combine their coin purses enough to spell out the 90 gold required. But Ickle had already taken a liking to the young adventurers, and with few friends to count on in a place like this, he had himself a unique problem that he needed help dealing with far more than he needed gold. The short of it was, Ickle had gone and tried to reanimate some corpses that he had dug up at the local cemetery. He hoped these would make good bodyguards to protect his store, since the brutes he would have preferred to hire were usually the drunken culprits throwing things through his windows while he slept. Shockingly, however, bringing back the dead as personal servants hadn't gone so smoothly. Now, the violent and uncontrollable zombies were locked away in an abandoned mine shaft right here in the city. So, if the party was willing to pop over and perform a few enthusiastic secondary burial acts, then Ickle would happily provide the 90 gold remove curse service free of charge. They ventured over to the mining district and made their way down into a spooky, dark mineshaft, in which they didn't have too much trouble finding themselves face to face with a small horde of undead. Thankfully, all that practice whacking weeds earlier seemed to pay off for them, as they went on to dismember and decapitate the undead with not so much as a bite on them. Finally, with the corpses cleared away, the party decided a quick looting couldn't possibly hurt anyone, and got right to defiling the dead bodies that they had just defiled. As they proceed to rummage, Nadar finds an interesting silver locket on one of the most recently dead corpses, still mostly intact. Popping the locket open, Nadar shows the rest of the party the picture of this very man, along with a wife and daughter that aren't currently accounted for here amongst the dead bodies. Yet in opening the locket, a small, well-folded note also drops out from it, evidently being used as a hiding place. Upon reading the note, it goes as follows.
If you are reading this, I believe I must have been murdered. I think I have been poisoned by someone, or something, that has been stalking me for weeks now. To whoever finds this, please bring this locket back to my wife and daughter in the city of Dale. She will pay a far better price for its safe return than you would get from any merchant, I assure you. Once you're there, please show Emma this letter. Emma, you know how limitless my love is for you. I'm so sorry I won't be there for you anymore, or the little one. Don't tell Sophie what happened to me. Just tell her that I will wait for her at the stars.
With the depressing, yet promising reward waiting for them at Dale now, plus a job on offer to get paid for the trip there too, the party believe their next step has already been chosen for them. They return to cure the curse of Dane's affliction, learns that Ickle knows nothing about the locket, then make their way back, practically hand in hand in the view of the setting sun, and take rooms for the night at the First Spill Tavern, to enjoy a well-earned rest and an exciting day ahead of them. But as they all sleep peacefully and dream of what awaits them next, the angelic Zook keeps picturing the power behind such a magnificent staff of fire.